Even when you consider all of recorded history, Egypt's political system in Cleopatra's time was pretty unusual. In this video, I'm not really that interested in talking about pharaohs, or the royal court, or political intrigue. That's a completely different discussion. What I want to get into today is Egypt's bureaucracy, and how it functioned on a day-to-day basis. This is usually underemphasized by historians, but I find it utterly fascinating. In Cleopatra's Egypt, and by that I mean Egypt in the 1st century BCE, it was pretty much a totalitarian state. I know that that's a pretty crude way of putting it, but it's true. The level of bureaucratic control that the government exerted over day-to-day life was extreme, even by our standards, and by ancient standards, it was off the charts. Egypt's power didn't come from its military might, or from political cunning. Their power came from incredible wealth. The wealth, in turn, came from agricultural production, which was the envy of the world, and tightly controlled by the state. Almost all agricultural land in Egypt was royal land, and by that I mean that it was personally owned by the pharaohs. The ruler of Egypt, and through them the Egyptian bureaucracy, had absolute control over this land, and through the land, the wealth of the entire country. Let me give you some specific examples. Every year, the Royal Agricultural, I don't know what word to use, Ministry, Department, Bureau, let's just say the Royal Agricultural People, provided farmers with the seeds that they were supposed to plant. Since it was royal land, the farmers had no choice but to accept. At harvest time, they were required to return to the Royal Agricultural People the exact same amount of seed that they were given to start with, along with a substantial cut of the crop yields, which served as their rent payment for the year. If you think about it, they were basically renting the seeds too. If the farmer deviated from the state's agricultural plan in any way, they were brought up on charges and prosecuted as an oath breaker. In cases like this, a council of elders called a kenbet would sit in judgment, and the punishment would normally be something like a sizable fine. By the way, the Egyptian legal system was much more flexible than the Roman one. The Romans prided themselves on their strict legalism. The Egyptians, on the other hand, prided themselves on their pragmatism, and their courts reflected this. What was the point of punishing an oathbreaker with corporal punishment, when all the government wanted was to recoup their lost revenue? You see? Pragmatism. Believe it or not, that was just one small aspect of Egyptian bureaucratic control. If a farmer wanted to do something simple, like cut down a tree that was in the way, they had to plead their case in front of the Royal Agricultural People. Think of it like municipal bylaws, with the added bonus of literally being afraid for your life and livelihood if you ever made an infraction. The fact that the land was personally owned by the pharaoh was not just a formality, it was the law, and it was drilled into the farmers' heads on a daily basis. The entire farming system was carefully designed by royal officials to maximize both profits and crop yields, and they were incredibly good at this. Another example, if you wanted to brew alcohol, you had to apply to the government for a brewing license and pay a small fee. This sounds familiar to us, but it was virtually unheard of in the ancient world. Once you got that license, you were required to buy barley from a state-owned company, which, on top of their arbitrary prices, levied a hefty sales tax for its trouble. Once you brewed the beer, you were required to sell it back to another state-owned company at, again, arbitrary prices. That company then took that beer, turned around, and sold it for a profit. If it happened to be sold overseas, they took another cut in the form of export duties. As you can see, the government got like 5 or 6 bites at the pie before the product even made it to market. This kind of heavy taxation, where the government was involved at every step in the supply chain, was present in many industries. People wouldn't see a system like this again until the modern age. In other aspects of life, state intrusiveness reached levels that we would consider unthinkable. During harvest season, people needed permission just to leave their farm or village. Freedom of movement was thrown out the window in the name of profit and productivity. To be honest, this kind of reminds me of Tsarist Russia, where people needed special royal permission to move to another farm, and sometimes that permission was denied. With Russia, historians had to invent the term serf, because people living under that regime were clearly seen as less than subjects, but more than slaves. The same kind of thing could be argued for ancient Egypt, less than subjects and more than slaves. I don't think it's crazy to say that in many ways, the rulers of Egypt personally owned their country. and maybe, depending on your point of view, the people in it. The entire state was basically designed from top to bottom to maximize profits. This helps to explain why the Romans, who basically didn't even have a bureaucracy, looked at the Egyptians like they were from another planet. Before you click away, a brief word. I've been really hesitant to go down the Patreon road because frankly, I look around and almost without fail, the reward system everybody's set up is embarrassing and awful. There are lots of so-called shoutouts, which is gross, and lots of exclusive access to stuff that's basically garbage. That all being said, I have an idea on how to do it better. This is the system I've designed. You donate $1, you get a vote. Once a month, I send out a ballot to all donors with every idea I have for a future video, and everybody gets to vote on them. Preferential voting, of course, because I'm not a monster. After the voting is tallied, I have 1 month to deliver a video on whatever historical topic the group decides. If you donate at a slightly higher level, you get to submit ideas that will compete directly with mine on those monthly ballots. If your idea wins, tough luck for me, I have to do it, even if I have to go out and read a few books first. So that's the system. I set it all up through Patreon. The link is patreon.com/Historica Civilis, which is also in the description. To me, getting a tiny democratic process going is fun and collaborative and a little exciting. The important thing is that it's the kind of experience I would want if I were donating. So head over to Patreon. I promise we'll have a good time.